thank you for taking time out to join us to learn about immigration law. I have with me Rose Muigai, an advocate of the High Court of Kenya and also a solicitor in the UK. Rose is an immigration law expert, and today she'll be sharing with us her views on issues related to immigration law. I also have Salome Asena and John Sunday. They can wave to you all before we start. So a few housekeeping rules. If you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A because that way it's easier for us to keep track of the questions. If you have a comment, confine that to the chat. Please don't raise your hand because I'll not be able to ask you to speak during the webinar. And just for you to know that the webinar is being recorded and we're also streaming live on Facebook. So thank you once again, and without much further ado, I want to proceed to the program for this afternoon. We have 2 hours to talk about immigration law. So we'll start off with key concepts, the relevant government agencies that work with issues of immigration, the law underlying immigration, or the sources of legal authority, types of immigration statuses, voting rights when you're an immigrant, and of course, as the questions come up, the conversation will flow. So I now hand over to Rose to take us through Immigration Law 101, starting off with the key concepts. Over to you, Rose.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you everyone who is joining us today. I would want to probably just discuss about 2 issues, that is immigration and migration. These are 2 issues or questions that keep coming back and forth. What is immigration? What is migration? And immigration, for today, what we'll be discussing is migration, that is action of moving into a country to permanently stay. That is, you migrate to Kenya and you want to permanently settle in Kenya, or you want to permanently move to another jurisdiction. And migration, that being the movement of people from one area to another. You can migrate from one town to another or from region to region. So those 2. As regards to immigration in Kenya, we have 4 statutes that govern immigration in Kenya. And the main one being the Constitution, the Kenyan Constitution, 2010. And then we have the Kenya Citizenship and Immigration Act, 2011. And we have the Kenya Immigration Regulations Act, 2012. And we have the Kenya Citizenship and Foreign Nationals Management Act, 2011 as well. That's as far as the laws and policies are concerned, Helen.
Okay, that seems to be quite a large stable of laws that define for us how to handle matters related to immigration. I want us to move now to the relevant government agencies around matters immigration. And here we can look at issues to do with, the immigration department, the judiciary. So do you want to take us through the relevant government agencies that handle matters related to immigration?
Currently in Kenya, immigration is mandated to the Immigration Department in Kenya, obviously through the operations of the Acts of Parliament. But we also have other bodies in Kenya, like the national legislation that deals with the IDs and alien cards. And if you make an application, it will go through to the Immigration Department. So the Immigration Department is mandated to consider the application. They consider either if you're a foreign national, they will consider your application to stay in Kenya. If you're a Kenyan citizen, they will consider your application for passports. So the Department of Immigration has two sections, the Kenyan section and the foreign national section. Now, when you make an application and the application is refused, the other government organization that handles appeals, probably the first instant place would be to the Cabinet Secretary of Interior, and they hear the review of your complaints. And if you're not happy with that, then it moves again for him for appeal. And finally, if that is not the case, then under Section 20 of the 2011 Act, you have a right of appeal at the High Court. So you have jurisdiction at the court to hear these immigration appeals.
Okay. What about customs and border control? They are not part of immigration?
No, customs work hand in hand with immigration because their mandate is different. The customs is dealt with by KRA, immigration is dealt with by the immigration department. And that is through the different operations of the law. So okay. The border immigration is by immigration, the customs is by KRA, the Kenya Revenue Authority.
Okay, okay. So you've talked about appeals. So I can appeal a removal if I'm a foreign national and there's a specific directive that I be removed from the country. I can appeal this removal first through the CS, did you say? And then the courts, or?
Depending on the source of your refusal, that is, if you're arrested, obviously you have to be presented to the court, so you're already subject to the court process. But if it is through application process, if you make an application to immigration, and we have 3 entry points, so probably you'll be making an application to the immigration. If they refuse your application, then the first instance is to ask a review through the CS. If the CS maintain a decision, you can appeal through the CS. If you're not comfortable with the decision, then you can move to court. That is if it is through an application process. If it is through an arrest, arbitrary or whatever, if you're arrested or you're apprehended wherever you are, then you're taken straight to the police station and then to court, then you're already subject to the court process. The other issue would be arrival at the ports. If you're allowed to enter Kenya, then you can be subjected to the court process. If they don't allow you to enter Kenya, then it's removal at that point. So depending on where you come in touch with immigration.
Okay, so a specific scenario, say, where I know someone whose nephew arrived from the US and it was not his first time in Kenya. He'd been to Kenya before. And then he was detained at JKIA. They denied him entry and a lawyer could not even access him. So how then do you balance that person's rights vis-a-vis the law? You know, he was not allowed a lawyer. He was, you know, locked up in that place, ready to be repatriated back to the US, and no reasons were being given for him being held.
I just like any other matter, I believe that what the lawyers could have done is to submit an application to court asking for him to be released. Even if he's been returned to his country of origin, you can still proceed with an application in court asking that he be allowed, or the immigration be allowed to let him come back to Kenya. I have personally done that on 2 occasions, so I know that it is very possible to have somebody who's been removed come back to Kenya, travel back. So the best option at that point would be first instance to contact him and request a review of the removal. If that review is refused, then you can proceed to court.
Okay, okay. So now I want us to talk, and here we will dwell on this section a lot. Types of immigration statuses, because I know there are employers on this, you know, participating in this webinar, and even, you know, individuals who would like to understand the types of immigration statuses, either as citizens or non-citizens, and if you could take us through these types of immigration statuses, because this is where we are going to dwell a lot on matters immigration this afternoon.
Okay. We have different status in Kenya that an applicant or a foreign national can make an application for. The first one is the work permits. Now, with work permits, we have different classes of work permits. That is from class A to M. That is class A to class M. And class A is for anybody who wants to come to Kenya for prospecting and mining. That is for class A. Class B is agriculture and animal husbandry. If you want to come to Kenya and you want to start farming, then instead of applying for every other work permit, you apply for this particular one. That is the class B work permit. And then we have the class C permit for the prescribed profession. Now, if you're in a particular profession like a pharmacist, a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, you can apply under the class C, prescribed profession. And then we have the class D, employment. This is the main one that everybody applies under. And the class D employment is for any employee who comes into Kenya and is being employed in a company. And then and this is mainly why I said it's the main one, is because this is the main one that foreign nationals are usually, or most employers just know about this one. Then we have class F, which is the specific manufacturing. If you come to Kenya and you want to start manufacturing, instead of applying for class D employee or class G, the next one investor, you can specifically apply for the specific manufacturing class. Then we have the class G, again, that is mainly known by everybody, but it is branded as the investor visa. And this is for specific trade, business, or consultancy. If you're coming to Kenya to run a specific business or a consultancy, then you apply for class G as an investor. And then we have the class I. This is approved religious and charitable organizations. We have missionaries, evangelist churches. If you're coming here to Kenya as an evangelist or church, whatever it is, then you apply under the class I. And we have the ordinary residents. Now this ordinary resident is for the class, is class K. This is mainly for retired persons. If you want to retire in Kenya, you apply under the class K permit. The rules have changed, unlike before when it used to be 35 years, it's now changed to 50 years. You must be 50 years and above and have sufficient funds to live in Kenya. And the last class is class M, and this is for refugees. So the people who are in Kenya as refugees and they want to work in Kenya or to eventually settle in Kenya, then the class M is the class that they need to apply under. And after 7 years, they can apply for Kenyan citizenship. It's gratis, it has no fees, costs as well. Yeah. And
so,
then
go on.
No, it's okay, ask.
Yeah, so I wanted you to expound a little bit on class D. Mm-hmm. What's the difference between class C and class D? Because class C says for the prescribed profession. So if I'm a pharmacist, say coming to work at USIU, can I apply for class C or class D? I see like class C and class D are just the same.
The beauty of class C, if you apply for class C as a prescribed profession.
Yes.
And number one, what you realize is that for you to qualify under class C, that is, if you want to work in Kenya as a lawyer, you must be authorized by the professional bodies. So class C primarily is those prescribed professions that have professional bodies that regulate and authorize you to work. So if the Pharmacy and Poisons Board give you your license to practice in Kenya, you can apply under the prescribed profession because you fall under that category. You can run your own pharmacy, you can under the prescribed profession. If you are an orthopedic or an accountant, because it is a regulated, Class C is for the regulated people, and they must be licensed by the regulatory bodies in Kenya. Now, when you look at Class D, you could be a lawyer, but you're working in a law firm, or you could be a doctor, but you're not working under, you're not licensed, or rather you cannot be licensed by the law society or the medical body to work in Kenya, but you're still a doctor, you're still working, you're still a lawyer, you're still working, but you cannot hold out yourself as an advocate because the regulatory body has not authorized you or licensed you to do that. That is where now the Class D comes in. Now the processing of Class D permits is quite thorough because again, if you apply for specific professions like the teaching profession, you need your regulator, that is the Ministry of Education, to provide you with a letter, an approval letter that they have given you permission to teach in Kenya. If it's the tourism industry, the hospitality industry, again, the Tourism Regulatory Authority must give you an approval letter. If it is in the ICT sector, then the ICT authority must. So each in the Class D and in the class, unlike the Class C, where you're regulated automatically and you have the authority, with the Class D, what you have to provide, if it is a requirement that you get an approval letter, then you must get the approval letter before you apply for the work permit.
Oh, so it's not just enough to have a letter from the organization that seeks to employ you. You must have an authority from, say, if you are going to work at Safaricom, for instance, you must have some authority from the Ministry of ICT.
If you want to teach in a primary school, in a secondary school, you cannot teach. The Ministry of Education must approve you, and that is the same even for international schools today. For you to teach in Kenya, I think now they've even moved to an extent that you must have, I think, a TSC letter now, approval to be able to teach in schools. When you go now to the ICT sector, the reason behind these approval letters is to make sure that the Class D, the whole reason behind all this is to make sure that they are not regulating or they're not giving work permits to foreign nationals for jobs that can be done by a Kenyan. So for instance, you will find that if you're in the hospitality industry, you apply maybe to be a chef, and the TRA, that is the Tourism Regulatory Authority, says that that job can be done by a Kenyan. The Tourism Regulatory Authority knows which job gaps and job groups requires filling by foreign nationals. The reason why you have to get an approval from the authority before the work permit can be approved. Otherwise, you'll find a situation where front office in hotels or clerical jobs in schools or any other job being given work permits, yet now the ministry that approves will be now saying you're flooding the market with foreigners, yet we have Kenyans who can do the same jobs. And that is why even if you apply for a Class D permit, it's not a guarantee that you will get it. If that job can be done by a Kenyan, or if you don't get an approval by the regulator. Yes.
Okay, so I've heard you mention TSC, and sorry, I'm sticking to this Class D a lot. But that's from a basic education perspective, because we know that teachers are subject to the TSC. So what about universities?
For universities, because you already have your own regulators, or rather you already have your set rules. And your set rules are for you to teach in a university, you must be a professor, or you must have a master's, or you already have those in place.
Okay.
The university is more of, we have quite a few foreign nationals lecturing or training at the university based on their specialization. Because if you find a foreign national coming into Kenya being a specialist in a particular area like zoology or anthropology, then based on the universities, because the university, before you take on board a foreign national to be a lecturer in your institution, then there must be a gap they're coming to fill, and that gap can't be filled by a Kenyan. So out of that, you don't directly fall under the TSC. I don't think so, because you fall, TSC, I think is for the lower, you are the higher education. So then there is the lower education. So the higher education has a different ministry compared to now. And I think you have an independent permanent secretary specifically for the higher education, not just universities, but TVETs and other colleges as well. So you wouldn't be subjected to TSC.
Yeah, so why I'm focusing on that is because we don't get any authorization from them to hire.
No, because TSC is too low for you.
Even from the ministry, we don't get any letter from them for us to hire, because we don't just hire lecturers. Someone could be coming in an administrative position. So for us, all they require us to demonstrate, like you said, is that there's no Kenyan who can be able to fill that role, and also to indicate in terms of, because they also want to know how's your planning. If that person wasn't there, who would take their place? So you submit a CV for that person and all that. Yeah, now you've talked about class A to M. I didn't hear about a class E. There's no class E, right?
No.
There's no class E, okay. And what would be the financial outlay for each of these, work permits? And what is like the waiting period, or, what's the process? Can someone just show up?
No, it's a requirement now that you cannot take up employment in Kenya unless you have a work permit. If you don't have a work permit, you can apply for a special pass that is issued by the Immigration Department. Now, the responsibility, and it is a legal responsibility, falls on the employer to make sure that everybody that is found in their premises, be it education sector or in the job sector, they must have a valid work permit. When we talk of class A to M, there is a standard fee that is the 10,000 processing fee. It is it's the first initial payments that you pay, the processing fee for, say, like class A, the prospecting and mining. It's non-refundable. And once your application is approved, then you have to, at least, you need to show that you have funds, sufficient funds, up to 100,000. And the fee for prospecting and mining is 100,000 per year. So for 2 years is 200,000. When we come to the agriculture as well, again, the same, the fee is 100,000 per year, 200,000. You need to show proof of capital of at least 100,000 USD. Another special thing about the agriculture and animal husbandry visa, the class B, is that you must show proof of land ownership or leasehold. Now, you need to understand that foreign nationals are not allowed to own agricultural land in Kenya. So unless the land is jointly owned with a Kenyan national. So in that case, then they need to hold land as a leasehold. That is for agriculture and animal husbandry. And you also need clearances and licenses from the relevant bodies. If you want to start fish farming or agro-business, you really need licenses from the relevant agri-bodies that regulate that particular industry. That's for the animal husbandry and agriculture. So farming is, yeah. When we come to the prescribed profession, the first golden rule is that you must be registered with the profession body or association or institution in your own country of origin. And if you're not registered in your own country, then it's impossible for you then to be allowed to come here. And the profession that you're trying to come and be registered for should be a practice that is of benefit to Kenya. For instance, say the orthopedics, the dentist, the pharmacists, then there's a list of the prescribed profession. It's not every profession that is a prescribed profession. There is a list. And yes, there is a list available. Let me see if I can find the list. Yeah, so we have the medical profession, or we have the dentist, the legal profession, the surveyors and estate agents, architects and quantity surveyors. We have the pharmacist, the veterinary surgeons, engineers and nurses, physiotherapists, accountant, actuaries, scientists, and ICT experts. That's all. So it's just
that list looks to me like it's a very old list, because I think right now in this country we have a lot of qualified manpower in that area.
Well, this is enshrined in the 8th schedule of the Kenya Immigration Regulation 2012. It's under Rule 26. So the prescribed profession is already enshrined in law, Rule 26, 8th schedule, so for the prescribed profession. So for this now to be amended to include the new professions, then we need to have this particular act reviewed. But for now, it's only those 15 professions that qualify.
Okay.
Okay,
and that one is also 200,000?
Yes, 100,000, 100,000, 200,000 for the 2 years.
Okay, okay. What about the class D?
Now we move to D, is the employment one. The employment one, this is the work permit. I've come across people complaining, I applied for my work permit to be renewed and it has been declined. You must, in every class D application, you must provide an understudy. And this understudy is the person that you're training to take up over from you. And the understudy's role after training for 2 years is to take up. So if you cannot have an understudy for more than 4 years, because then it means that your position is permanent. But we have, that is why you'll see over time that you apply for your permit after 4 permits and is declined, because for how long is somebody going to be an understudy, or for how long are you going to sit on that profession? But there are some categories, there are some positions that are reserved for investors, especially for investors, and that is the general manager position, or the CEO position, or the finance director position, because obviously it's the investment, they need to have those categories preserved for them. But any other position in the company, really more than 4 years work permit is at all order to have it renewed, unless it's on those categories. What you need, obviously, is Kenya requires that you must have academic certificates, which is also usually a challenge. If you look at some of the European countries, mandatory education ends at 16 years. and then they start on apprenticeships, work, and get enough qualification. So Kenya does not look at that. What Kenya requires is academic and professional certificates, which is mandatory. You must also report how many people that you have as foreign nationals. That is also important for employers to know, that Kenya keeps a data of how many foreign nationals you have employed in your company. Currently, I think they only allow a maximum of 4, depending on the size of the company. But this keeps changing every now and again. The fees for Class D permit is 200,000 per year, so that is 400,000 for 2 years.
That's steep. That's
yes,
really,
but you
really
see, yes. So this makes sure that you don't bring foreign nationals to jobs that Kenyans can do.
And like you said, this fee is non-refundable. So if they deny the work permit, you lose the
No.
400,000.
There is no, the 10,000 is
the one that is
that is non-refundable.
So
yes,
let's say that you offer employment to someone, they already got the work permit, then they decline the job. Can immigration give you back that money, or the onus is on you, the employer, to pursue that individual?
Happened last year. It happened last year, because now you apply for work permits from your country of origin. You don't need to come to Kenya. You can apply for the work permit, have the whole process done, payments done, but it is a requirement that you must come to Kenya within 90 days of the permit being issued. Obviously, COVID came. Employers had paid for the work permit fees. People refused to travel to come, and they lost their money. I don't know how they would get it back. There is nothing in the provision saying you can get your money back if the employee doesn't come to the country, but that money is lost.
Okay. You talked about a special pass before you move to class from B, you go all the way to class F. So what is this special pass?
I wanted to cover the special pass with the other passes.
Okay,
because
all right.
it is another category of status in Kenya.
Of status. Okay, all right.
Yes,
all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, so we've covered the D, which is 400,000 per year. People need, or employers need to understand that the candle can be blown off after 2 years, after 4 years, at any stage. It's not a guarantee that your work permit will be renewed, unless, as I said, you're holding a position that you're looking after the investors' finances or investment in Kenya. Otherwise, any other category is not mandatory that you will get your permit renewed. Yes.
Okay. So that was class
and also remember, in the same D is the same one that you need the relevant institutions letters. For instance, if it is tourism, you must have the approval letter from the tourism authority. If it is the teaching, you must get a letter from the ministry, ICT, from the different regulatory sectors.
Okay, so class F, basically what I'm hearing from you is that the fee, except for class D, the fee is the same.
The fee is the same, and except for A, which is 250 per year. Actually, for the prospecting and mining is 250,000 per year. And then, so that is for 2 years is 500,000. And then the class D is 200,000, that is 400,000. Class I, that is for the approved and religious charitable organizations or the ministers of religion, is only, the processing fee is just 1,000 shillings and the issuance fee is 5,000 shillings. The class M is free. The refugees don't pay processing fee and they don't pay the issuance fees. So the processing fee is non-refundable, And issuance fee you only pay when the permit is approved.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
So that was work permits.
Yes.
So which are the other statuses? Do you want to now move to the passes, or do you want to talk about?
I wanted to talk about exempt permits because it's important for people to understand that when you have been on a work permit for 7 years, after 7 years, you can apply for citizenship or permanent residence. So if you've been in any of the classes of permit for 7 years, you can apply for permanent residence or citizenship. Permanent residence, if your country does not allow you to have dual citizenship, and citizenship if you're allowed to have dual citizenship. Now, when we talk about the work permit for exempt persons, these are the people who work for the UN. I call them the CDCAS, you know, the red CDCAS, the UN people. Now, if your work permit is under the exempt persons, that is, it is issued under the immunities and privileges laws, then what that means is that your time in Kenya does not count. You can be in Kenya for 10 years, 50 years, but not a single day of that time counts. So I come across so many people working with UN, embassies, and they say, oh, I have been in Kenya for 7 years, 8 years on work permit. What can I do? And when you look at the permit, if it's an exempt permit, then that permit does not count even 1 day because they are exempt from immigration control. I think it's important for people to know that if it is a spouse and you intend to settle in Kenya eventually, it would be important that one of the spouses who is probably on a dependent pass gets a work permit that runs for 7 years for purposes of settlement, because if they are on a dependent pass of an exempt work permit, they can't settle in Kenya. They have to start clocking their time from day one. Now, there is you are asking about how permits, it's also important for people to know how permits can be validated or invalidated, because we have permits that are cancelled every now and again. And there are various reasons why a work permit that has been approved can be invalidated and subsequently cancelled. And that is if there is a change of circumstance or material facts. And one of them would be failure to take up employment within 90 days. Like we have talked about those who didn't come last year because of COVID. After 90 days, then the permits, if they're outside Kenya and they fail to travel, then the permit is invalidated. If you cease to engage in employment, if a permit has been issued and you fail or to engage in the employment, then the permit is invalidated. If you take up unauthorized employment, if you're authorized to take up Class D and then you start a company under G, then you are actually now taking up unauthorized employment. So basically, if you're issued with a permit for this particular work, you can only do that particular work. Otherwise, you will invalidate your permit. Fraud and misrepresentation. This is where probably you provide bank statements or documents or CVs or certificates that are not your CVs. Then that obviously invalidates your permit. And national security. If you're a threat to national security, then this is invalidated. We have a case law on that one. And because the case law on national security, that this is the Republic versus Home Affairs, ex parte Leonard Sitimaze. I'll provide that with you later. And you know, the courts really held that it is not mandatory for foreign nationals to reside in Kenya. You can always go back to your country.
Okay.
Yeah, so So rejection of a permit on grounds of national security does not violate an applicant's rights. And if an applicant's permit has been cancelled, in the circumstances, they have a choice to immigrate to their country of origin. So I'll share the authority with you later.
Okay.
Obviously, when all that is done, there is administrative review and a right of appeal under the 2011 Act, like we discussed before.
Okay.
Now we are done with permits.
So that covers the work permits. So which other status
we
of
have
immigration?
We have the passes.
The passes,
So,
yes.
Yes, we have different types of passes, and these again are issued under the Regulation Acts, Regulation 26, and it is for people who meet the requirements. The first pass is the dependent pass. So the dependent pass is issued to a person who is a spouse, a parent, or a guardian of a person who is lawfully entitled to remain in Kenya. Now, this could be if you're a work permit holder, your parent, your guardians, your spouse can be given a dependent pass. And the dependent pass is valid up to the time, it's limited up to the time limit of the main applicant. If your work permit is for 2 years, then that dependent pass is valid for those 2 years. So it is to the life of the work permit holder. Now, it's important to note that it is illegal to undertake paid or unpaid work with a dependent pass. And if a foreign national who is a holder of a dependent pass wishes to take up employment in Kenya, they can do so by securing a valid work permit. Again, if you're a dependent pass holder, your children, if you're a work permit holder and your children have a dependent pass, it is important to know that a dependent pass does not allow children to go to school. The children must obtain student passes to enable them to go to school. Oh. I see so many people who go to, because you have a dependent pass, you take your children to school without student passes. It is mandatory to get a student pass. Now, you know, the pass would be invalidated if the dependent is unable to maintain the dependent. And obviously there are other reasons, and amongst them would be if any child attains the age of majority, they stop being a dependent. Age of majority in Kenya is 21 years. And if you are probably married and then you separate and you're on a dependent pass, then the dependent pass ceases to exist, because it's invalidated because it was to the life of the work permit holder or to the marriage or whatever. But once the marriage ceases, then the dependent pass ceases. It's also important for dependent pass holders, or rather the main work permit holders, to know that if, and this is specifically for work permit holders, that if your dependent is caught working on a dependent pass, they are likely to jeopardize or invalidate your work permit. So a dependent pass holder caught working can invalidate the work permit of the work permit holder. Now, when you come to now dependent passes, when under the work permit, we have an issue with dependent passes in Kenya. I'm sure you've heard about it, and this is for male spouses. Unlike female spouses, it is easier for a female spouse to get a dependent pass. Obviously, the history of dependent passes have not been that very good, because if you're you can get a dependent pass as a work permit holder. If you're a PR holder or a citizenship holder, your dependents can get the dependent pass. So because of having sham marriages being contracted and people obtaining dependent passes, and as I have told you, dependent pass is to the life of the main person holder. If it is through marriage, if you're married to a Kenyan, then it means the validity of your dependent pass is for the life of your marriage. If that marriage was sham marriage, then you're holding that dependent pass fraudulently.
So if you divorce when you are holding the dependent pass, you have to go back to your country of origin.
It is easy, or you switch to another form of permit.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. So the other one is the special pass or emergency work permit. You were asking about that. This is a temporary work permit. It is issued for a limited period of time. That is, if you're temporarily conducting business in Kenya or in circumstances where you've probably applied for a work permit and you're waiting for its outcome. Now, the special pass is very important. It's issued for 3 months. And each month is 15,000, so times 3, that is 45,000 for the 3 months. Now, instead of coming to Kenya and working without a work permit, or you come in as a visitor or on a business permit, or the best option is to take a special pass, emergency permit, and you can do any business or work in any organization with a special pass. Yeah, it's very much straightforward. It doesn't really have a lot of things to do.
Okay.
The other one is the student.
Yeah, can we talk about the student pass? Because I know you will define for the participants what PR means when talking about citizenship. So yeah,
yes.
Can we talk about the student pass? Yes.
Now, student pass, that's why I said there are several status in Kenya. So we have the permits, the passes. So the other pass now is the student pass. Now, the student pass is mandatory for every person who is undertaking education studies in Kenya. They must take a student pass, and a dependent pass is not a substitute to a student pass. So a holder of a dependent pass must also obtain in addition a student pass. Now, any parent or guardian who is seeking to enter Kenya for purpose of receiving education must apply for that student pass. You see, like the work permit, you don't apply for the work permit when you're in Kenya, but you see the work permit gives you a window to get a special pass. You can carry on working. The student pass does not give you any window. You must apply for the pass before. For instance, universities open in September. Now, between July and August, students should have applied for the student passes because they are not allowed to enter the institution without a student pass. Now, even our East African community members, that is the Uganda and Tanzania, the 6 EAC countries, they still have to apply for student passes. The only difference is that they don't pay any fees. Yeah.
Just as we talk about the EAC, and is this work permit D? I have to take you back to work permit class D. Are East African citizens required to take out this class D work permit?
Yes, everybody who is not a Kenyan must take up a work permit. The difference between the EAC and other nationals is that EACs don't pay the fees. Their applications are gratis, but they must apply. Okay, and if they apply,
very useful information.
Yes, they must apply.
So gratis, participants, gratis is free.
Yes. Oh yes, it's free, yes. So work permits, application fees for the East African is free. For the refugees is free. For the missionaries, it's just 1,000 and 5,000, yeah.
Okay, okay.
So for the student passes. Now, again, student passes can be invalidated on various grounds. That is failure to enter Kenya within 30 days. Remember, the work permit was 60 days, 90 days. Student passes are only valid for 30 days from the day of issuance. Now, if you don't take up admission again, that is, one is to enter Kenya. If you don't enter Kenya within 30 days, the student pass is invalidated. If you don't take up admission of the education institution, then within 30 days, then the student pass is invalidated. Again, if you stop being a student, the student pass is invalidated. It is important to know that the law places a statutory duty on the principals or those in charge of the institution. So if you are a principal of an education institution or the person in charge, you have a statutory duty to make sure that every student attending the establishment has a valid student pass. And if you fail to observe that, then you commit an offense punishable by law, either through imprisonment or a fine. Imprisonment is 3 years, fine is 500,000 per each student. So if it is 500,000 and you have 10 students, then that is 5 million. So it is mandatory that you do not take up students who don't have student passes, and they must apply before coming to the institution, because they cannot enter the institution without the documents. Now, the dependents of students can apply for a dependent pass whilst the student is undertaking their studies in Kenya. All they need to show is that they have sufficient funds to maintain and accommodate their dependents and guardians in Kenya. Also, if you're a dependent of a student pass holder, you can apply to work in Kenya through the work permit program if you qualify under any class.
So how long is this student pass valid? So
1 year.
1 year.
It's valid for 1 year.
1 year. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's
And
valid.
I must apply for it before I come to the institution. Okay.
Yes, because the cost is quite expensive. There is no processing fee for student passes. It's just 5,000 issuance fee.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. Remember, especially for higher education, if your students are above 18 years, they must go for security vetting. That is, they must be vetted. Yeah. Whereas anyone below 18 years does not go through security vetting. The reason why it is important for students to give an allowance of 2 to 3 months to apply for the student pass. Probably.
So when you say they go for security vetting, is this where they present themselves to the immigration office?
No, there is a background search on their origin. If they are genuine students, are they a national threat to security? Are they a national threat? Are they a threat to the national security of the country? So that takes time. So it is important for students to submit their applications on time.
So there's been this ongoing, should I call like diplomatic tiff between Kenya and Nigeria, where they subject Nigerian students to this security vetting, and it takes quite some time. So if you're an institution that admits or takes in a large number of these students, sometimes you find that they expect the institution to be the one to speak for them in that fora, yet this is out of the hands of the institution. It is government agency with another government agency on the other side of the continent. So do you see a situation, since you practice in this area, do you see a situation where there'll be a relaxation of sorts?
I don't think
some
so.
of these requirements for West Africans in particular.
What happens is that different countries treat different people differently. America treats Somali nationals or Islamic nationals differently. But there's a genesis for a nation to profile a particular nationality, ethnic group, or whatever, because I don't even think if it is Nigeria, it's every Nigerian. Probably it's a particular Nigerian. And you'll realize that we have different categories. You will hear Pakistanis in the car dealership saying they're also profiled. Now you'll hear the Turkish saying they're being profiled, but there's usually a reason behind it. And that is why, like I told you, if you look at the case law from the courts, that when it comes to national security, the bottom line is that people can go back. It is not mandatory for them to be in Kenya. So when it comes to national security, is it the responsibility of the institution? I believe so. I also hold institutions responsible a bit. I would say I would hold them a bit, because the institutions belong to the country where the immigration rules are applicable. So for instance, if you move to Nigeria, you'd expect the university in Nigeria to help you with your student visa, because you don't know Nigerian laws, but the university understands the law. So what role would the university in Nigeria play in helping you to do that? So basically what you do is to make sure that before the students travel to Nigeria, you process their student visas from Kenya to Nigeria. And the same, I would say that if you, it's not a practice in Kenya, which I have seen in the education sector, but it is a practice in the employment sector. So the same way the employment sector applies for their employees' work permits, I believe it should be the same way. Institutions should be applying for international student visas, because you understand the immigration better than they do. They cannot be able to keep on ping-ponging back and forth. They don't understand what is this, why am I being profiled, why is it because I'm a Nigerian, why is my Tanzanian being considered before me? They don't understand that. Well, I'm not saying that you should do it for free, no. What you should do is that with part of the school fees that they're paying, to make it easy for them, then you charge them the immigration processing fee, like you charge them the application processing fee, include in that fee the immigration, and then now you can help them process. Because it's not just your institution, it's all institutions across board. I don't know why they don't help students to apply for the student passes, but I believe you should be able to assist them with that, and they will never be able to understand the system. Even if they try to understand it, they will not. I found so many students who've been caught up in some very strange situations because they don't know what to do. And they find their friend who tell them, I know a friend who know a friend who know an agent who know a broker. And then the poor students find themselves giving their passports to the wrong people, and they have fraudulent visas in their, but you see, to avoid all that, I believe the institution should be able to step in, talk to professionals like us or others out there to help in this processing, but to do it early, like schools.
Yeah, so for us, it isn't really a question of there not being a specific office that handles that. It's more about this security vetting is not within my control as the institution.
That you can't control. That
you
cannot.
Yeah.
No, you cannot. That is even the immigration department has no control. That security vetting has nothing to do with immigration. It is a whole process outside immigration.
Okay.
It is not part of the immigration process. It is outside, and that's why I said anybody above 18 years. And we have a list of prohibited migrants. If you look at that list, then you'll be able to know who do you think would fall under that list, and make sure that the applications are done earlier, not one day before.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a list available, and that list guides you on who do you think will soon be going for security vetting and how long. But anyone above 18 years with specific countries must really go under security vetting. We have a list of prohibited migrants who through, it's a mandatory that for them to go through that. The list keep on growing by day, by night. And I can share that with you later.
Okay, so at this juncture, can we take some questions because there's a question from an anonymous attendee. He says, hi, sorry to take you back. On land holding by foreigners, you mentioned that the restriction to holding agricultural land can be exempted if the foreigner holds the land jointly with a Kenyan citizen. Could you please point me to the specific section of the relevant law supporting this? Thanks. So that's one question. There was a question from Polycarp.
Read again. So they are looking for...
They would like to know which, first to confirm that you actually said that as a foreigner, I'm exempted from holding agricultural land, but if I hold it jointly with a Kenyan citizen, that's fine, okay? And so is there a specific section of the law that supports this?
The short of it is that only Kenyan nationals can own agricultural land. If it's not Kenyan nationals owning agricultural land, you can own it through a company, but that company must be owned, one of the directors must be a Kenyan citizen. So even if the foreign national is owning land with a Kenyan, the land does not belong to them. You cannot
belong to the company, and that company would need to have Kenyans as directors. Okay.
Yes, yes. So a foreign national cannot own agricultural land in Kenya.
Okay, Mr. Anonymous or Miss Anonymous, I hope your question has been answered. There was a question from Polycarp. Polycarp, where is your question? Was it in the chat? You had asked something about, yes, I see the question. Could you expound on overstays and the black stamp on the passport with deported on it? Now I'm getting a business. Now I am getting a business to go there. Will I be able to go or not? Or is there any other way to go to Polycarp? Is Hong Kong, is this Hong Kong or what is HK? If not, after how many years can I go? So I think he was trying to go to Hong Kong because he just says HK. And there may have been an issue on overstay and his passport got a black stamp on it saying deported. So how long will it take before he can go back there? You know, can he ever go back there? I guess applies to every other person who has the stamp deported on their passport. Yeah.
I think that will depend on the national laws of the particular
country. Yeah. Okay. So that was the question from Polycarp. Then there was a question about, I think you answered that one, about the key statutes, regulations, and legal precedents governing immigration into the East African communities with a sole aim for consultancy. That would be the class. That would be the class what? Since I'm a good student. It would be the class.
Is G.
Class G. Permits. Yeah. Then there was somebody who wanted to know, you've talked about dependent passes and why immigration is refusing to give him one based on his age and gender. And I think you've clarified or brought to our attention the fact that there seems to be an issue with dependent passes, particularly for the male gender. Yeah. Then the process of deportation. Do you want to discuss this when we are talking about citizenship, or should I just broach the subject
probably.
now?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Okay, so we get into citizenship, then we can talk about deportation, right?
Yeah, do you have internship and research students?
What do you mean? Do we have internship and research students? We have
Because
students who are on internship. Yes.
Yeah. So they have a specific pass for them.
Oh, if they are foreign nationals, or just if they are
don't
foreign
get-
nationals.
Yes, foreign nationals who are on internship and research, they don't
Yes.
apply for students, they apply for the internship passes.
Yes, those are things that Salome's office deals with. Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
we do have.
Okay, you have that one, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so we don't need to discuss about the employers' duties and obligations. I don't know if you have employers, do we?
Yeah, you could touch on those a little bit, employers' duties and obligations.
Yeah, so we have, I'll start off with the learning institution. We discussed about the statutory obligation to learning institutions, and the main one being the presumption of responsibility. And I've told you the penalty and the charges, or rather the fines. Employers, again, they have their duties and obligation to employers. They also have a presumption of responsibility. That is, if a person is found at an establishment and there's credible evidence to suggest that they're in employment, then they are presumed to have been employed by that person. And the fine, just like the institutions, is 500,000, and that is per person, and 3 years imprisonment or both. We have the same for estate agents and landlords. That is, this runs across whether it's work permit holders or student passes. Where they stay, the landlord and estate agents also have an obligation, and they have a duty, and that duty is to make sure even the business premises that everybody in there has either a student pass or has a work permit. The fine is the same, 500,000 per every person who is found at the house or at the accommodation, and 3 years imprisonment. And on top of this, unlike the institution and the employer, for accommodation, that is the people who own the accommodation and estate managers, they also bear the cost of removing that person from the country. So besides the penalty and the fine, they have to pay the cost of removing that person.
Mm.
Yes. Now going to talk about permanent residence.
There's a question from Judith. She wants you to confirm whether students can have their dependents get passes.
Yeah, we talked about that, isn't it?
Students, yeah. We
Yes.
talked about dependents and their students getting passes, but we haven't talked about whether.
I said the dependent, that is dependents of students. So a student comes with a spouse and children. So the dependents or guardian holders of student passes, they can apply for dependent passes. And if that dependent wants to work in Kenya, they are allowed to apply for work permit if they qualify for a particular category.
Okay.
Is that what she was asking?
I think so, yes. Kindly confirm that a student can have their dependents get passes. So.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a question from our Chancellor, Dr. Manu Chandaria. He has his hand raised. We have given you the rights as a host, so you can unmute to speak, and then you'll mute yourself again. So please go right ahead, Dr. Chandaria.
Hello, it took a long time to join. I think the numbers were not enough. Only 6 numbers to join. So I wanted to find out what's going on. And then again, I went to the third time. Finally, I got through.
Okay.
Thank
Sorry
you.
about that.
Just to say salutation to everybody and thank you.
Okay, thank you. You can unmute yourself now. I mean, you can mute yourself now, sorry.
Oh,
I think
Then we have quite a few who are locked out.
there are people. John, do we have everybody on? Or are there people still like in a waiting room?
No, there's no waiting room at all.
Oh, there's none. There's no
Yeah.
waiting room, so there's nobody
No.
waiting. Okay.
No, yeah.
There's a question from, I think it's the same thing about the foreigner and land and all that stuff. Article 65(3) of the Constitution, though, states that the body corporate can only be regarded as a citizen only if the body corporate is wholly owned by one or more citizens. I would interpret this to mean that the foreigner can only be a director and not a shareholder. Is that a question or a comment, anonymous attendee? Then Patrick Minor. Patrick, we already answered this question. Thanks for this session. Kindly expound on dependent pass challenges and requirements by foreigner husbands. Also briefly explain about permanent residence and citizenship. Yeah, we are getting to that, citizenship applications. I will appreciate if you could share contacts for Rose. Yes, I will definitely share Rose's contacts with you. She had talked about dependent pass challenges and requirements by foreigner husbands, but she can go over it again so that we then move to the permanent residence and citizenship applications, because we are now at 11 minutes past 3. Yeah, so Rose, do you want to expound further on?
Yeah, dependent passes used to be automatic previously, or a few years ago. You'd come, get married to a Kenyan, apply for a dependent pass, and it became automatic. And in the process of it being automatic, I think it was abused. And it's abused. Just come, get married to a Kenyan, and then you apply for a dependent pass, and it's a sham marriage. And you know, because the dependent pass is for the life of the marriage, then you will stay around with it for some time. Then it was married together when it became a challenge to issue, because remember, there's no problem with dependent passes being issued to ladies married to Kenyan men. Possibly, I don't know the genesis behind that, but they believe that the Kenyan men will have to keep I don't know. I can't comment on why it's easier for the ladies, not for the men, but the sham marriages, both ways, have been a challenge, I think, to the government, and they thought the only way they can do is to cap it. So then if now you apply for a dependent pass for a man, I think because we don't have a society, the Kenyan society is not a society where men rely on women per se. The option then was, if you don't qualify to get a dependent pass by virtue of your age, not age necessarily, so you move now to class K, which is the retired persons or persons of independent means, which is now the fallback permit that male spouses go for. Again, that was also abused. And you'd find, because its cap was 35 years, it was just like the dependent pass, that was abused as well. And the cap was raised now to 50 years. Now, unless you're 50 years and above, you can't get the independent means or the retirement pass. The dependent pass, if you're married after 3 years, again, because now we are swinging to permanent residence and citizenship, if the marriage is genuine and subsisting, if you can get a work permit because of your age, that is the class K, but you can get any other permit, obviously maybe class G would be a challenge. Then after 3 years, you can apply for permanent residence, and after 7 years, you can apply for citizenship. And we are soon now rolling over to that side, whereby if you've not been able to secure a dependent pass, then what can you do? Now, what you can do is what we are rolling to, but you understand what the challenges the government, just like the way Helen was talking about the profiling of certain nationals, it is the same problem that we have with dependent passes. The government finds itself in a situation where they're not able to tell which marriage is genuine, which relationship is not genuine. We also don't have, as a culture, unmarried partners' relationship being recognized by law, whereas out there, if you are an unmarried partner and you have children, Kenya doesn't even recognize if you're unmarried and without children. So it's also another challenge for foreign nationals who've been living together for more than 2 years. And because they don't have a marriage certificate, they are not able to apply for status and dependent pass status. Yeah, I hope I have answered that question.
Yeah, you have. And I just wanted to add that I don't think it's a challenge that is confined to just Kenya. This challenge is there even in the US, the UK. They want to, I think even in those countries, they really go to great lengths for couples to show that they are not in a sham marriage. So we have to understand that immigration laws are meant to, like kind of tighten certain requirements. And so, because they are protecting, they want to protect also their country, the resources, Yeah, so it's not unique to Kenya. Yeah, yeah.
And also the courts have, there have been, cases and authorities in courts that have maintained that a nation must be left to determine its own immigration policy. And this was because, you see, you must stay for 3 years before you can apply for permanent residence. And the courts have held that 3 years is reasonable and justifiable limitation for a nation to give that time period. Otherwise, if somebody gets married today and get permanent resident tomorrow, then we are now back to the sake of sham marriages. The UK is the same. You get married, you're given 3 years, and then after 3 years, you're given permanent residence, and then after 5 years is when you get citizenship, even if you have permanent residence. So just like you've said, is a global is a global way of trying to control immigration and to get the right people at the right place, in the right place. Otherwise, we'll have the same misused. And people have
in fact, I think even in America, what they do is, if you got into this, what they call them, the green card marriages. So if you get into one and then it doesn't work out, it's like you start the process of citizenship, or whatever you want to call it, all over again. They don't recognize that time that you were there. So it's tight everywhere as far as immigration is concerned. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we now move to citizenship and permanent residency. Yeah. Also a very, what do we call it? Salome, popular, very popular topic for discussion.
Yes. So we now enter to permanent residence. And permanent residence, or what I'll keep on calling PR, is a status that is granted to a person and allows you to enter and remain in Kenya without any time limit of your stay in Kenya. And this status enables you as the applicant and your dependents to take up employment freely and live in Kenya and study in Kenya, whatever it is that you wish to do in Kenya. And the permanent resident status is actually granted under sections 37 of the 2011 Immigration Act once the applicant meet the relevant requirements. The validity of a permanent residence certificate is if you don't reside in Kenya for a period of more than 2 years, then the certificate is invalidated. I know most people ask, oh, how will they not know? How will they know? It's very easy for them to know when you have lived outside Kenya for more than 2 years. Categories, we have various categories for permanent residents. And the first one, I would also want to say that permanent residence, it's on its initial conception, it was actually not there. There was when I think I had the privilege of being part of the group that reviewed the Constitution and the initial Immigration Act, but permanent residence was not there. It is a status that came about when they sat down and thought, hang on a minute, if a Kenyan get married in Tanzania and Tanzania does not allow dual citizenship, what will happen to a Kenyan? And for that reason, then permanent resident came about for the purposes of allowing Kenyan citizens to be able to come and live here permanently and work here permanently, because they are Kenyans crossing from one border to the next one. Now, the different categories of permanent residents are ex-Kenyan citizens. Like I have told you, it was mainly meant for Kenyan citizens, and we have 4 categories. And category number 1 is ex-Kenyan. So if you're a Kenyan who was born in Kenya and you lost your Kenyan citizenship, you can actually apply to be given permanent residence if your country does not allow dual citizenship. Like I have given an example is Tanzania here, that does not allow dual citizenship. Now, the next category is for work permit holders. Now, work permit holders who've been in Kenya for 7 years and they meet all the requirements under this category, they can apply for permanent residence. Now, the key thing that they must understand is that they must reside in Kenya continuously for 3 years preceding to the application for permanent residence. So 3 years prior to your application, you must have been in Kenya. Obviously, your spouses and children qualify, but you must, as the primary applicant, first get the PR. Like I said, PR is permanent resident. And then once your application is approved, then your dependents now can apply and spouse can apply in line with your status. That is for the permanent residents. Obviously, for you to apply, you must show that you've had 7 continuous work permits. If you've had a gap, unlike citizenship, as I'm going to tell you later, unlike citizenship, PR, you can have a gap. You can probably have 5 years and then you have a gap of 1 year, but the last 3 years are consecutive, you can apply. Whereas for citizenship, you must have complete 7 years without a single gap in between. So permanent resident is a bit flexible compared to citizenship. And mandatory with this one is that you must first get police clearance certificate. It must be original even before you apply. You must also have a valid tax compliance certificate. It is mandatory. And without a valid tax compliance certificate, you cannot get the permanent residence on work permit. So key thing for work permit holders, 7 years, they don't have to be consecutive. Even if you have a gap, at least the last 3 years must be years. The last 3 years you must have work permit. If you have a gap, that's okay, but with citizenship, you can't. Police clearance certificate is mandatory and tax compliance is mandatory. The other category for PR is a spouse of a work permit holder. Like I have said, if you're a work permit holder as the main applicant, immediately you get your application, then your children and your wife can get the application. Again, for them, it's mandatory for them to have police clearance. So although they are applying as your spouse, they really must also have a police clearance certificate. And for the children, Kenya is generous. As we know, other countries, children are up to 18 years. Kenya goes to 21 years. So if you have children below 21 years, then they also qualify. Then we have children. The other one category is children of Kenyan citizens. These are children who are probably born in Germany or in Tanzania. And by virtue of the operations of the laws of that country, they can't have dual citizenship. Then they can apply for permanent residence to allow them to come to Kenya. And if you are over 21 years, then you make an application independently. Yeah, but if you're below 21 years, you can apply as a child in Kenya. Now, children of registered citizens. Registered citizens are work permit holders. You see, we've talked about children of Kenyan citizens, then we have children of registered citizens. If your parents were work permit holders and they got the work permit, then as a child, you can apply for permanent residence if your parents acquired permanent residence in Kenya as a work permit holder. Again, you must be below 21 years. Then we have spouses of Kenyan citizens. And this one has been, it's seen quite a few footprints in the court corridors. There has been challenges like one of the questions that was being asked. And, you know, permanent residence and citizenship, as much as it is a right, just like the other global countries, it is a privilege per se. It is your right under law to apply, but to be granted the status is a privilege. Now, the key thing is that marriage must be genuine and subsisting, and you must be married for at least 3 years prior to submitting the application. And before you get the permanent residence, you must attend an interview. And in that interview, they are able to tell whether your marriage is genuine and subsisting. We've had a case law where people have challenged the 3 years time limit being unconstitutional. And the courts have held that the 3 years minimum is reasonable and justifiable limitation, because the argument was that it's a limitation to the right to family and right to dignity, but the courts have confirmed that is not true. So you must have completed 3 years prior to applying for permanent residence. Like I have said, you attend for an interview as an individual. If you pass the interview, then you'll be granted permanent residence. If you fail the interview, then you will not be granted permanent residence. Now, the application process is basically more or less the same. The main documents being police clearance certificate as well, marriage certificate, and confirmation of relationship and documents for your spouse who is a Kenyan citizen. Then we have widows and widowers. And if you are married to a Kenyan, or if you are married to a person and they pass away, and this is only limited to Kenyan citizens. It is, and this is why I tell most people who acquire permanent residence as foreign nationals that it is important not to put your dependents on dependent passes, because unlike citizenship that is transferable under widows and widowers, permanent residence and permanent residence does not pass under widows and widowers. It only passes under Kenyan citizens. So if you are a widow or widow of a Kenyan citizen and you were married for at least 3 years, you can get permanent residence. Why this was not for work permit holder, I don't know. And I ask most people, please don't put your family, your wife, your children, or your husband and dependent pass when you're a permanent residence holder, because the future is unknown. And if you die with your permanent residence. But if you're married to a Kenyan, for 3 years, you can apply for permanent residence. I hope I am clear on that one, Helen. You're muted. You're muted. You're muted.
Helen, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So it's confusing because you said if you are married to a person and the marriage subsisted for 3 years, then they die. If they were Kenyan, are you saying you can get automatic citizenship or permanent residency?
We are now discussing permanent residence.
We are on permanent residence, okay.
So what I'm saying is if you are married to a Kenyan citizen, remember if you're married to a permanent resident holder or to a Kenyan citizen, after 3 years, you can apply for permanent residence. Say for instance, it's a Kenyan man married to a Ugandan or say a French national. If the Kenyan man passes away, because he was Kenyan, the French national can apply for permanent residence. Now, if the French national is a husband and wife, both French, and the French has permanent residence, and his French wife has dependent pass, if the French PR holder passes away, then the wife can't apply. Because the dependent pass is for the life of
the work permit
of the status of the main applicant.
Oh, so if their status was PR, the dependent pass. So what is the duration of this PR status?
Permanent status, PR is for life.
For life.
Yes.
So why wouldn't it then transfer to the wife?
The law does not provide for that. Yeah.
And no one has ever sought to challenge that rationale.
So that is why I tell foreign nationals that if really you are a foreign national family, please, when you get the status, apply for your family. The future is unknown.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you get the status of permanent resident, make sure that your family also gets the same status. Okay.
Yes. But if you're married to a Kenyan, as a widower, you can
It's
apply.
automatic. You just apply and you get it.
Yes.
Are there instances where they've refused to grant someone that status when they were married to a Kenyan and they are widowed?
Kenya is very compassionate.
Okay.
No, Kenya is very compassionate. In fact, it is so compassionate that even if we have different communities in Kenya, and if you look at the Asian communities, we have girls who are 35, 40 who are still dependents, and Kenya is able to accommodate them somehow. So Kenya is quite compassionate when it comes to family issues. But when you don't follow due process and you don't follow the law when you're supposed to follow it, then they don't. But if you do things at the right time, then Kenya is quite compassionate. So they will not. In fact, if you get married to a Kenyan and the Kenyan dies before the 3 years and you don't marry within the 3 years or marry within the 7 years, then you can still apply. That is how compassionate Kenya is. You understand? Okay. But yes. You see, but for the death, you could have still qualified.
Okay.
You understand?
Right.
But but it is very clear, the law is very clear that if you marry in between, you lose that, yeah.
Okay.
But we will get to citizenship here. But you see, that is only if you're married to a Kenyan. If you're married to a, somebody who've just registered and they lose and they pass away or the marriage breaks down, then too bad.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Yeah. So basically, the only primary document is a police clearance certificate and the death certificate of a spouse. The rights and obligation of permanent holders. Obviously, if you're granted permanent residence, you're required to comply with the residence obligations. But the rights and obligations are right to enter and remain in Kenya permanently. So if you are a permanent residence holder, you can actually, you no longer have immigration control. You can come in Kenya, live here permanently. But remember, you cannot live outside Kenya for more than 2 years because it is going to invalidate your, your status.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen people challenging that, but I have also seen Kenyans with indefinite leave, that is UK permanent residents, come to Kenya for more than 2 years, and the rules are the same. If you're outside a country where you've only been granted permanent residence, then if you're outside that country for more than 2 years, then you must apply again to see why you need it to be reactivated. Besides the right to enter and remain in Kenya permanently, and you're not subject to immigration control upon arrival or during your stay in Kenya, the other one is right to employment. You can work in Kenya, you can start businesses, you're really free to engage in paid or unpaid employment without seeking the relevant work permit.
Mm-hmm.
You're also free to study in Kenya. You can go to any education institution. You don't need a student pass. You can own property in Kenya and, both commercial, residential, agriculture, you can own anything. You can also settle anywhere in Kenya without any restrictions whatsoever. And you can live and conduct business anywhere in any part of Kenya. And so the only difference between permanent residence and Kenyan citizenship is the right to vote. Now, important to note that there are so many ways you can lose permanent residence. Kenya, as generous as it is, it's also as lethal in taking away the permanent residence. We've had cases in court of people who've permanent residence has been cancelled. And I'll tell you some of the reasons why permanent residence can be cancelled. If you're married, after 3 years, you apply for permanent residence. Then if you apply for citizenship after 7 years, then you lose the permanent residence. So you can't have permanent residence and citizenship. So the moment you acquire Kenyan citizenship, then you automatically lose the permanent residence. So the other one is if you breach obligations and conditions of PR. The obligations and conditions of PR are so many. So the moment you apply for PR, it's important to look at those conditions there so that you don't breach any of them. Removal order, unlike Kenyan citizenship, permanent residence holders can be subject to removal orders in Kenya. And when a removal order against you comes into force, then the permanent residence is automatically lost. So for instance, you've committed an offense and maybe the courts decide that you should be removed from Kenya, then your PR ends automatically.
Can I challenge that? Can I appeal that decision to remove me?
Oh, yes, you can. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because you see, for you to get a removal order, it must be through the court process. Because the removal order cannot come through, it's not a decision by the immigration. It's actually under Section 39C of the 2011 Act. Yeah, Section 39C of the 2011 Act. So if a removal order is in place, then you lose permanent residence automatically. You can voluntarily withdraw your permanent residence. Again, you can lose it if your marriage was a sham marriage. That is, if you contracted the marriage and it is discovered that it was a sham marriage, then the PR can be cancelled. If you're in breach of your permanent residence rules as prescribed in the Act, it can be, we have permanent residence rules and we have obligations and conditions of permanent resident status. Yeah, and the violation of the permanent residence rules are enshrined in section 39F of the 2011 Act. So it is important for people to know all this. And the other one is fraud and misrepresentation of facts. If you acquire permanent residence through fraud or misrepresentation of fact, you can lose it. Or if you're convicted of an offense within 5 years of acquiring permanent residence, and you're in prison for a term of 3 years or longer, you automatically lose your permanent residence. So within 5 years of acquiring permanent residence, if you given an imprisonment term for 3 years or longer, you automatically lose your permanent residence. Again, if you're domiciled outside Kenya for more than 2 years, you lose permanent residence.
Okay, so
permanent residence.
Yeah, that's quite a lot to take in just on permanent residence. Oh, wow. Okay, so we need to move on to citizenship because we have like 20 minutes left to the top of the hour.
So citizenship is really not very much. You know, there are various ways you can acquire Kenyan citizenship. And really, what is Kenyan citizenship? If you look at Article 14 of the Constitution, it states that a person can acquire citizenship through birth if either the mother or the father were Kenyan citizens at the time of their birth. And it does really not matter where the birth took place, provided you're born of a Kenyan citizen, then you know, it's by whom, not by where. And rights to apply for, have you understood that? Because it is a question that is asked by, it's really a question that keeps coming, that if I was born in Kenya, or I was born in Kenya, I have a Kenyan birth certificate, my mother was born in Kenya, am I a Kenyan? No, it is who gave birth to you and when. Because we have people who are born in Kenya before independence, and we have people who are born in Kenya after independence. So by who gave birth to you? So those who are born before independence is not by whom, but where. Those who are born after independence is by whom.
Why the difference?
Because there was no Kenya before.
Oh, so because there was no, okay. So there was no citizenship to come to you because there was no Kenya before.
No. But that is another whole day seminar.
Yeah. I want to probe deeper on that. I wanted to probe deeper on that one, but looks like it may take a while. So let's just proceed.
I'm sure the Vice Chancellor would have asked 1,000,001 questions on that one. Because Kenya was split into two. We have two sets of Kenyans. Because even then, when we didn't have Kenyan citizenship, that is probably we had the Kipande system, there are those who still had citizenship. There are those who had Indian citizenship, and there are those who had British citizenship. There are those who had maybe other nationalities from their European countries. But
so what about the natives? What about us, the natives?
That's what I said.
Our ancestors.
I said we, the Kipande system people. You understand? And then now you asked, yeah. So that's why I said, even if we, the Kipande system people, didn't have citizenship in form of a passport, we still had at that time European citizens who had their European passports, Indian citizens who had their Indian passports when they came to build the railway.
So are you saying that a passport is my mark of citizenship? A passport?
No, now I am now coming to, now I'm swinging now over to our side.
Okay.
So we are talking of before independence and after independence. So before independence, we Kenyans really were not defined by, we really didn't have a nationality per se. Let me put it that way. You couldn't say, I am a Kenyan, I am a Ugandan, I am a Tanzanian. You couldn't say that. But the Europeans had come with, I am British, I am Norwegian, I am Dutch, you know,
Okay.
and the Asians could say, I am Indian, and they had documents that defined them as nationals of the countries where they had come from. Now, when we got to independence, if you look at the history of the region, or rather when the region was getting their independence from 63 to 64, most of them, Africanization is what was the elephant in the room. They just wanted Africanization. They did not want A or B, they just wanted A. So what Kenya did was that in 1963, gave the Europeans and the Asians an opportunity to be Kenyans and gave them 2 years. So between 1963 and 65, you had an option to register as a Kenyan. So Kenya did not, so that is the genesis of Kenya not having dual citizenship. So you either had to be a Kenyan, Indian, or European. Now, the Europeans obviously didn't want to lose their citizenship, and then the Indians or Asians were split into 2 categories. Category 1 were those who were running businesses, and category 2 were those who were not running businesses. So those who were running businesses, you will see there is a history where the father or the head of the family took up Kenyan citizenship, and the mother, because they were British overseas citizens, that's why I said it's a whole day seminar, because they had the British overseas citizens, so they remained with the British overseas citizen for the purposes of turning the children to British, and the father took up citizenship for the purposes of running businesses in Kenya. Now, when Kenya said, if you don't take up Kenyan citizenship, and if you have to work in Kenya, you must have a work permit. Then that was around 1965 there. And Kenya and the Asians who did not take up Kenyan citizenship opted to take a work permit. So what Kenya did was to ban trade in certain areas, in certain towns, and certain trades. That's why now we had the mass exodus of Kenyan Asians to the UK. And then the UK overnight, for 3 days, for 3 nights, amended the Commonwealth Act to say that you can only have a right of abode in UK if you are born or your grandparents were born in UK. Remember that their parents were born in India, their grandparents were born in India. So there's no way they had heritage in UK. And overnight, we have the history of stateless Kenyans, now stateless Asians in Kenya, now running to the 5th generation. That's why I said if we did this when the Vice Chancellor was here,
the Chancellor
would have really asked so many questions. So that is the genesis of where. So where only operates before independence. By whom is after independence. Because you will see so many Asians now coming to say, my mother registered as a Kenyan citizen and got citizenship in 1965, but they were born in 1961. So what that means is that if they were born in 1961, the mother was either British, or the father was British, or the mother was Indian and the father was Indian. So they had until 21 years, because Kenya was generous, allowed children up to 21 years to have dual citizenship. So by the time they turned 21 years, they had a choice to remain with British citizenship or take up Kenyan citizenship. Obviously, when you speak to most of them, they say, I needed to go and study in UK, so I retained my UK citizenship. If you look at case law on citizenship, most of those cases relate to such cases, that my mother naturalized she was my mother. And the position is that it is not when you were born or where you were born, it's by whom. So if you were born when your mother was not a Kenyan, then despite the fact that they are Kenyans by legislation, you cannot claim Kenyan citizenship.
Okay.
Yes, so we go to, yeah, we are okay with that?
Yeah, I've gotten it now, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, so Kenyan citizenship, anybody can apply. Obviously, it's a right under Chapter 3 of the Constitution. And how to apply, obviously, there is a procedure to apply for Kenyan citizenship. So you can either be registered, either be married to a Kenyan or adopted child, or you lawful residents in Kenya. But we'll go through each one of them. But it is also important to note that the citizenship by legislation may be revoked at any time for various reasons in line with Article 17 of the Constitution. But unlike permanent residence, it is the process of cancelling citizenship is quite lengthy. And I'll tell you more about it so that you see why it is important to have citizenship than PR. But either way, if you can comply with the law, I don't see anything wrong with them. So is there a time limit for considering citizenship application in Kenya? No, there is no time limit given as to when an application for citizenship can be considered upon application. But obviously we have case law, and case law has determined that 4 years delay is quite unreasonable. We also have the Constitution, sections, Article 6.4, Section 6.4 of the Fair Administrative Action Act 2015, which says, and I don't know why people have not relied on this one, that if an administrator fails to furnish an applicant with reasons for administrative decision or action, the administrative action decision shall in any proceedings for review of such action be presumed to have been taken without good reason. Again, Article 259 of the Constitution provides that decisions should be decided without unreasonable delay as often as occasion arises. In short, you cannot fault the government for taking their time to make a decision on a citizenship application. That is why you'll hear people complaining that their citizenship application has been sitting there forever. But obviously, it's not just in Kenya, but the world over, the granting of citizenship is a tall order, and it is a rigorous process. Categories of citizenship, there are various. You retain it as a Kenyan citizenship. That is, we have Kenyans who are in the diaspora or wherever they are. And if they are married nationals, they don't lose their citizenship by virtue of marriage or by virtue of taking up another citizenship. You know, before the new constitution, the moment you took up another citizenship, you lost Kenyan citizenship. But now by operations of the new constitution, Kenyans retain their citizenship by virtue of even if you take up another citizenship. So, and how do you acquire citizenship? We have two avenues of acquiring Kenyan citizenship: through birth or legislation. So you can be a Kenyan citizenship through birth or legislation. Birth, obviously, is provided at Article 14 of the Constitution, and whether born in Kenya or outside Kenya, and this applies to also children. It's also critical to note that any child found in Kenya below 8 years and its nationality is unknown, it is presumed to be a Kenyan citizen. Yeah, we also have a limitation to how far Kenyan citizenship can pass down for children born outside Kenya. I don't know how this will operate, but we are yet to see how far they can. For instance, a UK citizenship is quite complex, but well, maybe this limitation will catch Kenyans at some point, maybe in the future, maybe in 10 years, 20 years, I don't know. But if I give you an example with UK citizenship only passes 3 generations if you're born outside UK. For instance, if a grandmother was born outside UK, grandparents, both of them born outside UK, and then they have children outside UK, and then these children have children outside UK. Now, these grandchildren are able to pass citizenship to the great-grandchildren, but the great-grandchildren cannot pass citizenship beyond that. Now, for you now to be able to pass citizenship, you have to go and give birth in the UK. So now UK have 2 elements, born by whom and where. So where is, as you see, the 4th generation. By whom is up to the 3rd generation. And I believe this limitation under Section 7 will probably one day roll that way, because it provides limitations of descendants of Kenyan born outside. And I don't know when it will be effective. We can only wait and see, but I believe sometime in the future, when I don't know, it might, like UK, come to effect at one point. When it comes to registered children, like I have told you, this is a common problem with the Asian community. If you register, if you are a French national, you come, you get citizenship in Kenya, you can pass citizenship to your children who are under 18, who are under 21 years, and any other child born when you have already registered. But any child who was born before you registered as a Kenyan, and then they turn 21 years and they have not registered as Kenyan, they can never come back and say they were born of Kenyan citizen. Oh, my mother is a Kenyan, but they are only registered as Kenyan. So that cannot really pass. And that is a very, very common issue within the Asian community, and the courts have ruled that citizenship by registration cannot be transmitted to those who have already been born, and certainly Article 14.2 did not intend otherwise. So basically, if you're below 18 years, 21 years, you have an opportunity to register your children below 21 years. If you don't, then they lose that opportunity. So it is very, very important that if you have the opportunity, you do it, and the courts have seriously put that down. Dual citizenship, as we know, obviously introduced by the new constitution, and Kenya doesn't bother anymore. You can have dual citizenship. Now it is up to the other laws of the nations where you are. That you can. Now, what the law requires is that every dual citizen is required to disclose their other gained citizenship as prescribed by law within 3 months of becoming a dual citizenship. So it's a legal requirement for Kenyan nationals to disclose their other citizenship. And if you fail to disclose the dual citizenship, you commit an offense, and you shall be, which is either the fine is 5 million, and imprisonment for a term not exceeding 3 years. I don't know why. I presume probably the penalty is too high, because we have Kenyans coming to take up public
offices.
Yes, public offices, and they are dual citizens, and they have not declared. And you can see the fine is 5 million or imprisonment, because you cannot take up a public office unless you can only be a judge or a commissioner. You cannot hold any other public office. So penalty is quite hefty. Disclosure of dual citizenship is a duty that is imposed on Kenyans who hold dual citizenship, not just Kenyans, even foreigners. But you see, with foreigners, it's easy to know because they are registering as Kenyans. And, you know, the validity of dual citizenship shall be until the time the person remains a Kenyan citizen. And once you cease being a Kenyan, then the endorsement of dual citizenship will become. So we have dual citizenship certificates that Kenyans are given or foreigners are given. And it's your duty to actually disclose to the government that you have dual citizenship. You know, like I said, there are limitations to dual citizenship holders, and one of them being holding of public office. And like I said, that is why probably the penalty is too high, because you know, a dual citizenship has the same rights and obligation like any other national, but there are limitations when it comes to holding a public office. We have seen that in a case law of I think a US citizen who was trying to apply for an MP seat, and he was a national of another country. And, you know, I find the courts were very, you know, the courts are very interesting. They say nobody stops you from applying. You can apply. It is your right to apply for any public office. You can vie for any seat. But when it comes to now being appointed for that particular seat, that is where now the law captures you, because you can't be an MP, you can't be a senator, you can't hold any public office. Now, but we have an exemption, and the exemption is obviously under Article 78.3, which provides that if by operations of the law of the country you were born, you can't be able to stop being who you are, then, you know, the law automatically makes you a dual citizenship, and you are unable.
You're frozen, Rose.
You hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you. We're actually at 1 minute past 4. Salome, we have until 4, right? Or can we go on until 4:30?
I'm actually coming to the end.
Okay, maybe 10 more minutes, yeah.
10 more minutes, okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
So if, for instance, Obama is born of an American mother and a Kenyan father, he did not choose who to give birth to him. So he did not choose to be American, he did not choose to be Kenyan. So because of that, he is exempt from these limitations for dual citizenship holders. He can come to Kenya and be the Kenyan president or hold public office. So for those children who find themselves in such situations, the limitation does not apply to them. Regaining Kenyan citizenship, obviously anybody who acquired Kenyan citizenship before 27 August 2010, they lost Kenyan citizenship and they have to apply to regain. Currently, the mandate for regaining is under the CSE's office. I don't know why, but the delay is too much, so many applications pending. I don't know what can be done about that, but that's where we are for now. But Kenyan citizens must apply to regain. We have issues with adopted children. That's another topic for another day. But children who are adopted by foreigners and then they become foreigners, they have started coming back and saying, hang on a minute, I was born in Kenya, so I'm coming to regain my Kenyan heritage. The fact that I was adopted by a Swedish or an American citizen, I was born in Kenya. And the courts have said, yes, if we can trace their records in Kenyatta Hospital by a Kenyan parent, then they're Kenyans, they can regain. So it's an area that is becoming quite interesting on the legal front. Marriage, again, if you're born to a marriage to a Kenyan national, like I said, after 7 years, you apply for citizenship. And it's pretty much straightforward. But obviously, the process is lengthy. They need to confirm that the marriage is genuine and subsisting. Widows and widowers, like I said, we discussed this when we were discussing the PR.
Yeah.
But again, provided you don't remarry within 7 years, you can apply as a widow or widower. And like PR, that doesn't pass to you if you had registered. Citizenship, if you had registered, you can still apply. Work permit holder, again, after 7 years, you can apply for citizenship. I think currently there's a slowdown on this one, but the question is, like I keep asking, or like the question in the air that is never dropped by anybody, is everyone on a work permit going to end up to be a Kenyan citizen? I don't know. But again, after 7 years, you can apply. All you need to show is that you've had work permits for 7 years. Adopted children by Kenyans, again, can apply for citizenship. We have two categories that are interesting. That is for stateless persons and migrants. These are the Shona people, you know, all these migrants who migrated to Kenya before independence. The key thing is, if you're able to show that you migrated to Kenya before 12 December 1963 and you've never left Kenya and you don't have another citizenship, then you have, they had 5 years to register. From 2010, 5 years, but it was extended to 7 years. They can apply. That is for stateless person and migrant persons. Now, when we come now to the Kenyan Asians, the question is, when did they become stateless? They only became stateless after the UK changed its law in 1965. So what does that mean? They are not stateless as per the Kenyan law, because they became stateless after 1963, not before 1963. Migrants, obviously, if they were here before 1963, then the descendants of stateless people and migrants are also allowed to register. Like we saw the Malawians, their descendants can now register as Kenyan citizens. Now, renunciation of Kenyan citizenship, we had discussed this, but it has two ways. You can voluntarily renounce your Kenyan citizenship. If you've seen people married to German nationals, the first thing they come to do is to renounce Kenyan citizenship because Germany does not allow dual citizenship. The same with Tanzania next door. If Kenyans are married to Tanzanians, they have to renounce Tanzanian citizenship for them to, Kenyan citizenship for them to be Kenyan citizens. We have interesting case laws. Again, most of these are Asian case laws, but then again, the position is the same. Voluntary renunciation and involuntary. So we also have involuntary loss of Kenyan citizenship. This is a category that was developed through case law, and that is by Miguna. And the courts held that the acquisition of his Canadian passport under the circumstances that he was in, that is, he did not choose to leave Kenya when he left Kenya, cannot be construed as a voluntary act in terms of Section 97(3)(a) of the repealed Constitution. So basically, Miguna has introduced, that is why if lawyers took up immigration law, they would develop this area of law. But currently, Miguna has introduced this voluntary renunciation where we are in today. Now, loss of Kenyan citizenship or revocation, and like PR is the same. If you're in prison, treason, presumption of citizenship for the 8-year-old. If it is not legit, then it is cancelled. Fraud, false misrepresentation cannot. Now, I want to discuss about loss of citizenship so that you can compare it with the PR. Remember the PR, the process of revoking permanent residence was like, a piece, very easy. But the process, unlike permanent residence, the process of revoking Kenyan citizenship is very lengthy, giving both the applicant and the cabinet secretary an opportunity to present their case prior to the revocation. You see, the other one, you just wake up and cancel. This one, you have to give notice. And you must give notice in writing, giving the reasons for the intended revocation. And then once you give a notice, and the notice must be in writing, then the applicant is given an opportunity to respond. And once they respond, if the cabinet secretary, after considering the presentation, make the decision to revoke, then as soon as he registered the revocation, then the applicant has a right of appeal to the High Court. And if the High Court maintains it, you can go to the Court of Appeal, and from the Court of Appeal to the Supreme Court. And it is only after the Supreme Court upholds, then can you have the citizenship revoked and you surrender the documents. So basically, canceling citizenship is quite lengthy, and yeah, and the rights of citizens is right to vote, elections, reside in Kenya permanently, be appointed in public office, own land in Kenya, basically everything a Kenyan can do. And that's the end of, yeah.
Wow.
Well,
this needs another session. I don't think we have really even, I think today we just scratched the surface. We would need to have another session on these issues of immigration. There's a question from somebody who posted it on Facebook. I think you kind of touched on it, but it talks about, when did Kenya start providing citizenship to refugees? What about asylum seekers?
what did you ask?
So the person wants to know when Kenya started providing citizenship to refugees and asylum seekers.
Imagine that is another
webinar.
Refugees are governed by the UN Convention, the 1951 UN Convention. They have they have a department on its own for refugee affairs. The operations of refugees in Kenya is really a totally different, that one is not even 1 day's webinar, it's like 3 days or a week's webinar, because different refugees have different reasons why they are here, there are 5 grounds. When it comes to refugees and asylum is a lengthy one, but short of it, if you have been granted refugee status, you can cross over to the Kenyan side if you want. Most of them don't want, and gain Class M permit. Once you get Class M permit, which is free, after 7 years, you can apply for citizenship or permanent residence. I think that's the short of it. So instead of staying in the camp for 10 years, people who've been in those camps since 1991, still waiting for repatriation. I don't know how the repatriation, I think that's another 1 week webinar. How refugees are moved from the camps to wherever they are going. I don't know how that operates. But then again, if they really want to work in Kenya, live in Kenya, they can cross over to Class M permits and live here permanently and work here. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I don't even know how to, I'm going to have like an entire night just thinking about what you said. So instead of sleeping, my mind will be busy just absorbing all this information you have given us today, Rose. And I want to appreciate you from the bottom of my heart on behalf of the USIU Africa community and our partners and our participants from today's session. Thank you so much. I see now why you are the expert on immigration law. So next time we will get into immigration, from a global perspective also, and talk about deportation, because I see that we've left our audience hungry They want more. So that means that we'll have to have a part 2 of this session. But thank you so very much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you to the participants. As usual, we get very incisive questions, and we appreciate that because they also open up our minds and help us to think more around the issues. Thank you to Salome and John in the background. Thank you very much. And of course to USIU Africa, without whom we would not be able to host these webinars. To our attendees on Facebook, thank you. Keep the conversation alive on Twitter with #USIULaw. I know I'll see Rose next week at USIU. She has graciously donated, were they 4 or 3 books?
4, 1 for you and 3 for the university.
Yes, yes. So next week we shall have her formally hand over the books to us. Thank you. She's actually the only person to have written a book on immigration law in Kenya. So kudos to you, Rose. Thank you for setting the pace and the trends on matters immigration. All right. Unless you have something you'd like to tell us, I now want to close this session.
I would want to just say thank you for this opportunity. And thank you very much, Salome and John, for taking your time. And Asante Sana, I'll be seeing you next week. Thank you.
Yes, there's somebody who wants your contact. So what I've done is I've asked them to let us know how they registered. Because I'm not sure you want to give it. Do you want me to give it out now?
You
the
can
email
share
address
my
you sent
email
me?
address. Yes, share the email address. Yes.
So I can share it. So Rose's email address is Rose, R-O-S-E, Muigai, M-U-I-G-A-I, that's one word, at Glascote, G-L-A-S-C-O-T-E, Rose, the word Rose, R-O-S-E.com. So I'll repeat that, Rose Muigai at GlascoteRose.com. Thank you. Thank you all for the comments. I appreciate it. Yeah, so bye-bye.